Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome to my live happy Friday morning. Welcome to my bedroom as well. So excited to be here. I have a podcast recording in another hour and a half with this amazing expert in sleep. Feeling really, really excited about today. And I'm super excited about our live today because today I'm going to be talking a little bit about the way in which I felt change in my body, what I decided, or the feelings that I ultimately decided to pursue, and how important it was for me to actually feel that, as opposed to just like thinking of the goal. This is really making me think about the recent podcast that we released with Nicole Cruz, who's a leadership coach, a leadership and a life coach, a TEDx speaker. And she talks a lot about how when you're even thinking about like New Year goals or you're creating a vision board, how important it is for you to understand the feelings that you are trying to that you want to be encapsulated into any experience, and how important that is, because that is what's going to help you sort of move and make decisions, identify opportunities to help you capture or experience rather those feelings. And that's part of the work of the journey. And as opposed to thinking of just like the achievement or the goal. Nothing wrong, of course, with identifying goals, but also bearing in mind how it's not just about this end goal, right? It's not just about getting the thing. It's about enjoying the process, what happens in between, the person that you become, the feelings that you experience, the connection that you have. It causes you to be more present. It causes you to be more connected, more empathic to the person who you are connecting with or engaging with, or the activity, the work product that you are thinking about. So I'm so excited to certainly be here. And I'm looking at two different screens. I'm going to be going back and forth because I'm live on TikTok and on YouTube. And today we're talking about just some of the practices that I personally began implementing in my own life in order to start moving towards I really dramatically sort of changed the structure of my life. And I did it pretty aggressively, I would say. But I did it aggressively because I kind of had no choice, because in 2024, things were just unraveling before my eyes. I think optically, I had um, a very perfect sort of, I don't want to say perfect life, but I had the kid, the family, and the husband, a provider of a husband. I had a career, I had degrees, and I had all of the things that society tells you you're supposed to want. Um, and and I had also inherited a lot of, if not all, of the generational patterns and ways of thinking about gender roles, about labor, about my even my own self-worth. And when things were not great in my partnership, when I was really looking for just dramatic change, I didn't know exactly what that change was going to encapsulate. I just knew that I couldn't continue to feel this way because the way in which we were operating felt so exhausting and burned out. So, what do I mean by that? Well, my husband traveled a lot for his work, for his job, and the travel was not, in my mind's eye, it wasn't necessarily predictable. Like, we would kind of find out about, he has to be in the Middle East, or he has to be somewhere to go meet people he needs to meet, a week or two in advance. And so it almost never allowed us to establish a routine or a pattern of shared labor, of, how are we going to be managing the kids? Everything just sort of fell on me. And people are always like, well, you should go, hire a nanny and hire a driver and hire this and hire that. And, we did all of the things that we thought would help us logistically manage our very busy life. We have three young kids who also were involved in every single activity under the sun. And that was that was just so draining, and it was so hard. And by the way, I have a full-time career. At the time, I was an entrepreneur. I still am an entrepreneur, but I was in a different industry. And I was trying to build I worked in education, I was trying to build this education curriculum and experience, this leadership experience that I was selling to school. Anyways, it was just like a whole thing, and it was exhausting, because I definitely felt like I was in the foxhole by myself, that I was just holding down the fort, and, when I look at sort of the previous patterns of both my culture and my family, the women did everything, and I was like, "No, we cannot do this anymore because 'cause I'm about to die." And it's not fair to my kids either. They want their dad around. They want two parents. They want two people who are going to be present in their lives, who are going to honor what they want, who are going to listen. I wanted also that family experience. So there were so many things that I was like, this is just not working. I think every major aspect, if you look at my life in buckets, okay, if you look at my life in buckets of like family, work, maybe relationships, all of them were strained. All of them were holding on by barely a thread. And I think that um, it was something that I personally really clung to. I would have these moments of looking at my husband and saying to him, like, we can make this work. Like, you want to have like this busy career. I do too. We want to have, and like, here are the systems and here are the practices that we're going to put in place. And they almost never stuck. That was the first thing because they just weren't sustainable. And because I was the one who was in charge of basically making sure that those systems continue to function, everything from the nighttime routine to lunch to like transporting kids to activities. By the way, again, I'm working full time. And so it was just, I was like, this can't be anymore. And the way in which I started to really think about change, I didn't have an idea of where or what my new life, okay, was going to look like. I just knew that I was not going to continue down the same one. So I started running. And I started running as a way to primarily sort of manage my stress, okay? And managing my stress, I always, when I go back to the prior to, the other, if you will, stressful period in my life, um, it was when I was a graduate student writing my dissertation, and I would just go run every single night, almost every single night. And I would run around the track at UCLA. It was lit and there's people there. And because I'm a scaredy cat and I don't want to run anywhere by myself. So anyway, so I would do that. And I would do it like at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. And it was, it was just the way I sort of put myself to sleep, if you will. And so I would do that. And I noticed that as I was running, um, these experiences would happen to me like on the trail. And so I was laughing, I would cry, I would get in my head, I would think all of my thoughts. Um, and I would do that. I would do that almost every single day. So I live in Los Angeles. I live near not UCLA anymore, but I live near a major stadium. And so I would go running around that. I live near the Rose Bowl. And and for me, it brought such peace. I would experience literally peace in my life for that moment of time when I was like, like running around the Rose Bowl. But it was something I had never ever experienced before. It was a feeling that that I don't recall, at least in recent times, feeling in my body. And so the ability at the end of that run to have all of these emotional experiences again, I was thinking about how shattered things were in my marriage. I was thinking about how exhausted I was trying to grow my own consulting practice and education. I was exhausted managing like three little kids and all of their activities and all of their needs by myself, primarily. That the feeling of peace was so visceral to me. I was like, wow, I feel like a different person after I go on this run. And then because I started to do it so much, it just became this routine. And it became so routine that I began to even know, I was able to predict how I would feel at certain places around the Rose Bowl because I would just do it so much. I could tell you every crack, every sort of incline, every decline. I could tell you where I was going to run on the street and which part of the Rose Bowl where I was going to run on the sidewalk. I mean, I could tell you everything of that trail, and that predictability and that peace and that calm, that movement, frankly, brought me. it led me to start looking at the way I was eating, the way I was consuming alcohol. It compelled me to look at different aspects and period or different, yeah, parts of my life that really caused me to sort of recalibrate in a major way. Now, I know if you're listening, if you're watching, that's kind of annoying, right? Like, because I I watch all of these, or not watch all of these, but like I have seen people like on social media who talk about like I get up at 4 a.m. and I go for like a 12-mile run. You're just like, what? That's so annoying. And that's so admirable, right? At the same time. And that was really, I was that person in 2024 where I was like so routinized about what I ate the same thing for breakfast, ate the same thing for lunch, ate the same thing for dinner. While, of course, like taking care of my kids. My husband and I were separated at the time. And it felt like, even though it was emotionally, from a family perspective, very tumultuous, it was also, um, it helped me to really understand from the top of my head down to the tips of my toes exactly what I wanted to feel in my life. I wanted to feel supported. I wanted to feel um I wanted to feel more energized. I wanted to feel more peace. I wanted to feel more routine, knowing, of course, like life is life. You can't have that all the time. But there are ways to get to that place and that space that brings you ultimate, ultimate clarity. Like it was so clear to me that that feeling was exactly what I wanted in my life. There was no other way I could live my life and not have this moment or this moments. How can I multiply that, right? Of peace. And I would begin to multiply that feeling by taking better care of my body, by sleeping, by eating better, consuming more protein, frankly. I started resistance training on a routine basis. I was doing it several times a week, in addition to running around the Rose Bowl. I mean, I was probably the fittest I have ever been in my entire life in 2024. And I felt amazing because of all of these changes that I was making to myself. Now, the reason why I'm starting off with movement is because I think it is a critically important component to helping you obtain clarity. And there's research around this, right? There's research around your parasympathetic and your sympathetic. And I don't know if I'm going to say like research, because this is just a physiological fact, right? When you can calm that part of your body that is stressed out, that is in survival mode, and you can do something to bring yourself a moment of peace and calm. And this can be captured through movement. Doesn't mean you have to run around the Rose Bowl. Doesn't mean you have to start eating, 200 grams of protein every single day, but it does mean that you have to do better and right by your body. That's like a non-negotiable, because that will put you in a calm state of mind that will take you out of fight or flight and put you in a more restful, peaceful place. And that is so important, because that is the way that you are meant to live. It is that feeling that you are meant to experience on a routine basis. We are not designed to be in constant, like hypervigilant, like stressed out, like exhausted, burnout places. And so there's no easy answer to feeling this feeling, at least from my own experience. It's not like you can just take a shot of something, or you can just, eat a protein bar and all of a sudden you feel this moment of peace. No, I think you actually have to put in the work in order to enact the changes that you want to see. And then that work helps you to identify, oh, how do I want to feel? How do I want to feel on a more routine, on a more persistent basis? Because this feels actually good. This feels like this place in this space feels like I can actually accomplish and do anything. And the bonus, not the bonus, but the huge bonus to that is that you're more present for the people who depend on you. You're more present and locked in, because you feel this physiological benefit of being in a more peaceful, calm state of mind. And it was in that experience, okay, and it's frankly, it's collective. And this took me a couple of weeks. I will be very honest with you. I remember telling my friends, I'm going to go in a hole for like 3 months and I'm going to work on myself and I am going to emerge a better person, whether I am married or not, because this was the period when we were separated and things were very tumultuous. And so, I think that going back to those practices, that was the key to unlocking, "Oh, this is the change, and this is the way I wanna feel." And using those feelings as sort of the guideposts for how I wanted to feel, not only just, personally, but what I wanted it to feel like in my professional life and my personal life, in my marriage. I wanted that. And, and not everyone was happy with those changes. I have to be very honest. It caused, for example, my husband to sort of restructure and rethink. And what I said to him in this moment of change for myself is, you can continue down this road of like travel and, you can continue to do that. And that is okay. And I know that I won't be there with you if that is the choice that you ultimately make for your life, and I completely respect that. I just can't be there, so we're gonna have to split up, and that's really what it came down to. And when he made the decision as well to, and it took some time, to be totally honest, a lot of marriage therapy, a lot of self-development work on our own, with our own therapists. It was a decision that he made to ultimately make changes in his own life. And so I'm sharing all of this with you because I think it's really important that all of you know, that I was not raised to feel my emotions, if you will. I was not raised in an environment where my peace and my calm was something that my family encouraged. Okay, my family, they're very hard workers. I had a charmed life growing up. My dad's a doctor. I'm a spoiled doctor's kid. And my parents had real adult worries. They had to pay bills. They had to support, my grandparents. They had to do so much that they didn't have time to create an environment where our feelings were honored and talked about. They themselves did not know how to do that because my grandparents were in extreme immigrant survival mode, immigrating during a time when the Chinese Exclusion Act was still a law in the US. And so, they inherited a lot. And so, and like mental health was not something at all. That generation did not talk about that. I'm 45 years old and I feel like I'm just learning about mental health. We're going to talk about mental health and the critical importance of that in the next live. But I'm sharing this with all of you because I want you to know that not only did I not know that I had a right to feel peace and calm in my own life, but I also I had like, to even like, if someone asked me like, what does that feel like? What does that sound like? I don't even think at that point that I could describe that to them. And the only way that I got to describe being in a place where I could say it out loud, what it feels like in my body, what calm and peace feels like when it's enacted out in my household, when it's enacted in my place of work. I only could describe that to you now because I have had this experience of running on a routine basis, movement on a routine basis, and taking care of my body by going to sleep, getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night for a period of time. I know that's so hard, especially if you're a working parent. I'm not even going to pretend like I do that on a routine basis, but when I do get the sleep that I need, holy moly, it's life changing, right? So, movement, sleep, and nutrition, cutting back on alcohol. I don't cut it out completely out of my life. I still enjoy a good glass of wine, and I certainly am it's very limited, especially post holiday. It's a very limited experience where it was a pretty routine experience for me at especially one of the most incredibly stressful times in my life. And then paying closer attention to the amount of to my nutrition, particularly the amount of healthy protein that I take in. Not all protein powders, I'm learning, or foods even, are created equal. So really trying to pay attention to whole foods. But anyways, this is this is what I guess, what is the takeaway from this? If you don't know what it feel what the ti if you know that there's a change that you need to make, but you're not quite sure where to what moves to start taking, I really encourage you to do some movement, go for a walk, do something, I think, that really gets your heart rate up. Some people have shared that, like, some of their best ideas come to them, like, in the shower. So I don't know if it's, like, just putting yourself in the state and place of, like, zen, but that's super important because, being able to, um, just calm your nervous system and come into a place and a space where you feel that calm in every inch of your body, that's gonna give you clarity, and with that clarity, you can start making decisions on your next move. It's okay if you don't know exactly what that is, not everybody does. So my name is Lindsay, and I'm the host and creator of Courage Class, a podcast that centers on the Asian American community and their experiences, and we reclaim narratives around success, mental health, peace and calm. And so I really and rest, if you will. And so our next episode is going to be released next Tuesday. It's a very personal episode where I'm going to be delving into this exact same story. So this is a first for all of you who are tuning in, and I really appreciate you stopping by, and I'll see you next Friday. Okay, be well. Have a great Friday.